Welcome to the first of our video series on International Coffeehouse. These videos will show what was served for each coffeehouse and also include some conversations about culture. Join us this week as we serve some popular food and drink from around the world. First, let's check out our cultural iceberg. We use this iceberg as a metaphor for understanding the complicated dimensions of one's culture. The tip of the iceberg represents cultural elements that are easy to see or identify. The bottom of the iceberg represents deep-rooted cultural values, attitudes, and notions of one's culture that may not be explicitly stated otherwise. Our student assistant, Sakai, will talk about an element of his own culture this week.
Learning styles. So tell us about your learning styles in your culture.
Okay, so the learning styles in my culture will be more focusing on individual study, like when you are having your own time and study independently. Instead of studying a huge group, everyone share their ideas.
This week we served green tea originating from China and Arabica coffee beans sourced and roasted in Brazil. One food served included fried plantains. Plantains are a staple food in Ghana. Shout out to the African Student Association for teaching us how to make these last semester. Lastly, we had a variety of noodle packets, which Sakai will tell us more about.
Everyone, so we have 4 different kind of instant noodle ramen from different countries. The first 2 is Shin Ramen and the Nuguli from South Korea. Shout out to my South Korea brothers over there. And next one, we have the vegetarian choice with mushroom and vegetable soup, as well as the seafood. They are both from Thailand. Sawadee ka.
International Coffeehouse events will obviously look a little different this year, but we hope to use this as an opportunity to provide you all resources to develop your own intercultural competency. We define intercultural competency as the ability to behave and communicate effectively and appropriately with people from different cultures. To help us better understand cultural differences for this specific coffeehouse, we'll be taking a few moments to talk about Hofstede's dimensions of culture. The dimensions of national culture were developed from a study by Geert Hofstede and his colleagues about how values in the workplace are influenced by culture. The dimensions that he presents represent independent preferences for one state of affairs versus another. So it's meant to distinguish countries from each other rather than individuals. These representations are relative, since national culture can't normally be put into one box or one value assigned to an entire national culture. So let's talk about the different dimensions. The first one is power distance. Power distance represents the degree to which less powerful members of a society accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. This means that certain people in the society have larger levels or higher levels of power, and the society is okay with that. People have their place. All is good when people have their place. Low power distance scores represent societies striving to equalize power distributions and question the justification between inequalities of power. For this example, the power distance score for Brazil is slightly higher than that of the United States. This may be due to differences in governance and traditional values, such as showing respect for elders and holding societal positions in great respect. Individualism represents the belief that individuals are expected to take care of themselves and maybe their immediate family. Collectivism represents a society in which individuals and families are tightly knit together and individuals take care of that group collectively as a whole. The United States scores very high towards the value of individualism. A country like Spain scores a little moderate, indicating that Spanish national culture may reflect some elements of collectivism and individualism simultaneously. Masculinity in this dimension represents the desire and preference for achievement, assertiveness, material rewards for success, and just general competitiveness. Femininity stands for a preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for others. In a business context, this is also referred to as a tough versus tender type of dynamic. Denmark scores high on the femininity side of the spectrum. In a society like Denmark, it is important to keep work-life balance and make sure everyone is included. The society strives for consensus and manages conflict with compromise and negotiation. Society in the United States scores high on the masculinity spectrum and is seen even in the university context where there's this kind of
general belief that you should be the best you can be, win all the awards, and accumulate many successes.
Uncertainty avoidance dimension expresses the degree to which the members of that particular society feel uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. The fundamental issue here is how a society deals with the fact that the future can never be known. Should we try and control the future? Should we just let it happen? What can we do to manipulate our outcomes? Countries exhibiting strong scores of uncertainty avoidance maintain rigid codes of belief, behavior, and are intolerant to any unorthodox ways of living. Weak uncertainty avoidance scores maintain a more relaxed attitude where practice counts more than those principles.
The USA has a moderate score on this dimension, indicating that it is culturally acceptable to accept new ideas and to try new things, while still requiring a lot of rules and order. Singapore, on the other hand, scores very low on this dimension because of its high need for structure in its society. Singaporeans call their society a fine country. You get a fine for everything.
The next one is long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. Every society has to maintain some links with its past while dealing with the challenges of the present and the future. Societies prioritize these two existential goals differently. Societies who score low on this dimension, for example, prefer to maintain time-honored traditions and norms and view any changes with suspicion. Those with a culture who score high on this dimension take a more pragmatic approach. They encourage shift in the ways of living and efforts to educate and prepare for the future.
Americans have very strong views for what is right and wrong, and we see this in the political conversation that's so relevant today. This is why we see USA low on this score, as it attempts to maintain cultural and family traditions. France, on the other hand, has a high score, signaling that it is a pragmatic society. Absolute truth depends on situation, context, and time. This is an example of a society willing to adapt to achieve successful results.
Indulgence stands for a society that allows relatively free gratification of basic and natural human drives related to enjoying life and having fun. Restraint stands for a society that suppresses gratification and regulates the needs by means of strict social norms. So it may not be as widely accepted to consume a giant plate of food in one country as it is maybe in America.
The USA scores high on the indulgence spectrum, but is contradicted by its score on the long-term versus short-term dimension. An example of this contradiction would be how the government has waged a war on drugs, while at the same time the USA has a higher drug addiction rate than that of many other wealthy countries. India, on the other hand, scores towards a restraintive culture. Societies like this put emphasis on leisure time and control the gratification of their desires. Indulgence feels somewhat wrong in a culture like this.
This holistic model of cultural dimensions is helpful to understand that there is no dichotomy between certain, these extremes of social norms and values. A country's preferences may be somewhere along the spectrum, like we've seen in the examples. Tell us what you think of Hofstede's dimensions of culture in the comments.
For more information about Hofstede's dimensions of culture, go to www.hofstede-insights.com, where you can use the cross-country comparison tool to see what differences there are in these dimensions between all sorts of countries.
For more updates on the International House events and programs and just general things that we're doing, follow us on social media and join our newsletter to stay up to date on all that's happening that is iHouse. To stay up to date with future Coffeehouse reviews and more information like this, subscribe to this YouTube channel to learn more. See y'all later, and go Vols!